walk away. That was my first and last mistake. I'm blue without your face. But what can I do? 'Cause I'm just a sinking ship, and you're just a pair of lips that I've lost in the moment. All I want is for you to come back. Now I'm caught in the middle of life, and I need you.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Red Pill Diaries. I'm your host, your brother, and your friend, Rashid, and I'd like to thank each and every one of you for joining me on the most powerful platform for truth bar none on God's green earth. As we wait for Dimitri to join us, because he hit me up shortly, it'll be a minute before he joins us. We're going to talk about some news, but before we talk about some news, I got to air a little frustration. I'm being completely honest with you guys. There has been a concerted effort by, I don't know if it's YouTube, StreamYard, or whatever, to sabotage my show. They slow down my, I guess, pixels or whatever. They disconnect my links, everything. They take me out of the search engine. Everything that they can possibly do, they have done. We each time before the show, we check everything, and everything goes smooth. As soon as we go live, it starts acting up. Now, I want to remind you guys that I've had the internet people over twice this week, and they have changed out routers. They've checked the wiring, the boxes, everything, and everything has turned out to be straight. So we know it's not on the internet end. We know it's not on the internet. We have new computers. If you guys can see the level of computers that we have, it would amaze you for the show. So it is absolutely frustrating, especially as I sat down and I watched a few shows yesterday. And I saw how everything went smooth with these larger shows and things. And then I look around and I see how my show is being sabotaged constantly. I'm being honest with you. I am absolutely frustrated. Shout out to Arcane Eclectic. I'm sorry about that. But it is a very, very frustrating thing to be suppressed in every area possible. You know, the way they attack my channel, you would think that I had 700,000 subscribers. You know, but it's not like that. So, but I just had to let that go because I've been going through a lot of things these last 3 months. As I said to people, I've lost a lot of loved ones, a lot of people close to me in less than 3 months, a lot. And a lot of this is building up, especially the frustration with what they're doing on the show. And I just started to just say, you know what? I'm going to cut the show down. I'm just going to cut the show down, and I'll do it once a week. I was so frustrated that I was about to do that, but then I said, what would my mom say about this? And she would say, fight on, you know, just keep going through it. The people that are supposed to be there will be there, and they'll understand. They'll have the understanding, and they'll maintain. It doesn't have to be 6 million. It could be 6 people. It could be 2 people, just long as you continue to give out the truth. So that's what I'm going to do, and so we're going to continue to ride it out, okay? If you could see, Rumbles has been removed. The link has been broken. Locals, the link has been broken. Right here. And this is what I'm saying. This has to be a YouTube and StreamYard thing. It has to be. Because this computer, we have Apple, we have Gateway. I forget, this is the new desktop Dell computers. So it's not us. It's not us. And when I look at the monitor on YouTube, it says excellent connection. Excellent. So it is very frustrating. Even my son, being a tech guy, is getting frustrated over this because he's like, Dad, every time I go and set the thing, the settings change. So I just wanted to vent a little frustration, everybody, about what's going on or whatever. But until Dimitri joins us, let's go into a little news. We see, and I have to say this, the entire global order is collapsing. There's no doubt about it. The entire global order is collapsing. I have told you guys on multiple occasions that what we're watching is not the collapse of a republic. This is not a collapse of just an empire. This is a collapse of an entire world, the Western world and everything. And this is why they are so desperately doing any and everything that they can to try to prevent the emergence of opposite poles of power. What do you think one of those meetings, what do you think that Vladimir Putin and Trump is talking about? Trump is asking behind closed doors to give me a little room, give me this. See, the United States is not sincere in their negotiations. What they like to do is vie for time. All right, they like to buy time because they understand that the time is against them. They understand that the dollar system predicated on exceptionalism. Oh, Dimitri is in the building. Dimitri is in the building. Let me pull him up on the screen, and that's my guy right there, Dimitri. How's it going today, Dimitri?
Good, Rashid. How you doing, man? It's been too long.
I can't. Your mic.
Can you hear me now?
A little bit. Could you turn it up just a little bit?
I've got it at max.
Okay, I got you. So, Dimitri, first of all, tell the audience a little bit about yourself and the work that you do, because man, you kick butt. And I think that you do some of the best work, especially when it's covering Palestine and what's going on in the occupied territories.
Thank you very much for your kind words, brother. I really appreciate it. By background, I'm a lawyer. I started my I'm from Canada originally, and I was educated there, but I started my legal career in New York City. I worked for a large Wall Street law firm for a number of years, and then I found that to be a pretty soul-crushing experience. So I actually left the legal profession for a few years, and I know this is going to sound unusual, but I became a professional high-stakes blackjack player. That was back in the 1990s. I was part of a team with a bunch of disgruntled lawyers and bankers who wanted to leave the banking world. So I did that for a few years, and then I returned to Canada after that, and I became a plaintiff's lawyer for class action plaintiffs. And I did that for about 20 years and started doing journalism for an organization based in Baltimore called the Real News Network, an independent viewer-supported media outlet. And I sat on the board for about 10 years of that organization and was a correspondent. And that's where I really learned how to do journalism. And then I started my own channel after retiring from the practice of law full time. And it's called Reason to Resist, which is on YouTube and Rumble. And the reason, as the name indicates, reason to resist, what the focus of our channel is the criminality of Western governments. I believe that the primary force for evil in this world are the governments of the West. A lot of focus is understandably put on the U.S. government because it is the most powerful Western government by a wide margin, but it's really collective. It's not just the U.S. government. I was born and raised in Canada, and our country's a disgrace. I worked, for that Wall Street law firm for a couple of years in France. I have family from France. I'm eminently familiar with the politics of that country. Its government is a disgrace. We are committing injustices all over the world, the most heinous of them being, of course, right now in Palestine. And so what I tried to do is highlight the criminality of Western governments and to give voice to people who are resisting the crimes of Western governments, wherever they may be, but especially in West Asia, because that's right now where I think, what is happening, where the worst levels of violence being inflicted upon our government are being experienced. And when it comes to Palestine in particular, I have to tell you, up until about 15 years ago, I probably was pretty much bamboozled by the kind of mainstream narrative about Israel. More like 20 years ago. And what changed all of that was a very dear friend of mine told me to read Manufacturing Consent by Noam Chomsky and Edward Herman. And that book just had an absolutely profound effect on me, first and foremost because it exposed the efficacy and the tactics employed by the Western propaganda system. But a part of the way in which the Professors Herman and Chomsky did that was honing in on the cause of Palestinian freedom and how that had been misrepresented by the corporate media over years. And that for me was just a revelation. I really had no idea. I had no idea what the Palestinian people had experienced. So from that point on, I became very curious about it. I've been to Palestine a number of times, including last year. I speak regularly with people who are in the West Bank. I haven't yet been able to make it to Gaza, although I got to the border of Gaza in April of last year and saw from a distance in horror how Israel was just pummeling, one of the most densely populated places in the world. The last thing I'll say is, without getting into the details, because it's a long story, in the course of advocating for Palestinians in Canada, I led an initiative to get a political party in Canada to adopt a resolution supporting BDS, and that was the first time that happened in Canadian politics. And as a result of that, I became, fairly high profile within the Palestinian solidarity movement within Canada. And so a lot of people started coming to me, Canadian Palestinian solidarity activists, asking me to assist with one initiative or another, including litigation. We've done a lot of litigation on a pro bono basis for Palestinian Canadians. And so this has become, I guess I could say, Rashid, it's the Palestinian cause for me has become one of the primary causes of my life. And how I got here is it's a long and winding road, but I just feel that this is my duty, and it's my mission to do everything I can to help the Palestinian people at this moment.
And lean in on what you just said. How bad is it in Palestine? Because now we see that the Greater Israel plans are no longer behind closed doors. They're actually openly stating that they're moving towards building the Greater Israel. At first, it was all quote unquote conspiracy. And now they're moving towards building the Greater Israel, and they're moving on Gaza City. How bad is it for the Palestinians, and why is the Western media ignoring this while playing up the so-called nuclear card with Iran?
Well, the short answer to your first question is it couldn't be worse. It couldn't be worse. This is every bit as bad as what was done to the Jewish people by the German Nazis. It wasn't just the Germans, by the way. There were a lot of non-German Europeans who participated in the Holocaust right across the continent. It was a European Holocaust against the Jewish people. And although the Israelis have not yet killed as many Palestinians as the Germans and other Europeans killed Jews in the Second World War, if we allow this to continue, it will be millions of Palestinians. There will be millions of Palestinians slaughtered by the Israelis. What can one say about the horrors we've witnessed? And I've seen personally, I've forced myself to watch them, because you can't tell people in the West what is happening to Palestinians without watching them. I've seen hundreds of videos, Rashid, hundreds, over the past nearly 2 years of Palestinian children blown to bits, crushed under the rubble, amputated, undergoing surgery without anesthetic, x-rays of Palestinian children shot in the head, doctors giving testimony of young Palestinian men being shot in the testicles. We know that we have video evidence that Palestinian detainees are being sodomized, they're being raped. We have plenty of video evidence and photographic evidence and testimonial evidence that Palestinians in detention, and there are thousands of them, are being starved to death and routinely tortured. The huge swaths of the Palestinian population are suffering from acute malnutrition right now. Many of them have starved to death. And because of their intense condition, they are inflicted by all manner of preventable disease. It's just one can't find the words to describe what's being done to the Palestinian people, and the fact that this is being done despite the audacity of it, despite the evidence and the availability of the evidence, is really it's something that even distinguishes it from the Holocaust, because the Holocaust was done at the time that it was happening largely in secret. People did not have access as it was happening to the evidence of what German Nazis and other European Nazis were doing to the Jewish people. But here we can see it in real time. And it's still, Western governments are still doing it. They're still perpetrating it. They're still backing the parties that are committing this heinous atrocity. So it's as bad as it can be. And I think people need to understand that we are witnessing currently a Holocaust, another Holocaust, and it's happening in Palestine. And it's not just Gaza. I've gone to the West Bank. I was able to actually see the West Bank extensively last year. I've interviewed numerous Palestinians living under occupation in the West Bank. There's a genocide happening there as well. It's just that it's not as intense and as wide scale as what is happening in Gaza. But nobody should have any doubts that if the Israelis get away with what they're doing to Gaza, we will have an exact replica of that in the West Bank. And then they will move to East Jerusalem, where there are hundreds of thousands of Palestinians. And then they will finish off the Palestinians living in the 1948 borders of Israel, the ones who are actually Israeli citizens. Why would anybody think that they would stop at Gaza if they get away with it? Of course they're not going to stop. They want every square inch of historic Palestine to be exclusively their own, the Zionist population of Israel. And if we send to them the message that you have impunity, and there'll be no consequences for what you've done to the people of Gaza, of course they will then move on and do the same thing to the remaining Palestinians. And we're talking here over 7 million of them. So, sure, it's true. Sometimes this is said in Israel's defense by Zionists. Oh, they haven't killed nearly as many Palestinians as the Germans killed Jews. And that is correct at this point in time. But give them time, and they will. I have no doubt about that. As for the media, I think, to answer your question, why the media continues to spread Israel's pro-genocide propaganda, although there has been a shift in tone and content in recent weeks, as when mass starvation began to afflict the Palestinian population, the media still is doing, in general, the corporate Western media, a terrible job of covering this genocide. And I think to really understand that, we have to understand what function the media serves in the West. The media is owned by the oligarchy. It's controlled by the oligarchy, the same ultra-wealthy cabal that controls our governments. And it's, the reason why they seized control of the media, the most wealthy members of our society, is precisely to manipulate public opinion. These corporations exist to, as Noam Chomsky and Edward Herman said, manufacture consent for an agenda that serves the interests of a tiny, obscenely wealthy elite. And they believe it is in their interests to destroy any and all resistance to Western hegemony in West Asia. They're not just, of course, tormenting and destroying the Palestinians. They try to do that to, the Lebanese, particularly the Shia Muslims in Lebanon, any resistance factions within Syria. They've done it they're trying to destroy in the most brutal manner imaginable Ansar Allah in Yemen. And they've also attacked the Islamic Republic, as we've seen. And did considerable damage to the Islamic Republic, killed many people. So this is about destroying Western hegemony or resistance in this part of the region of the world, because that part of the world is extremely important to the overall project of Western global hegemony. It's not just the oil and the gas, which exists in enormous quantities in West Asia. It's also the location of it. There are very, very important trade routes that pass through West Asia. West Asia is in many ways a nexus between the continents of Europe, Asia, and Africa. So if you control West Asia, that confers upon you an enormous amount of power. And you don't have to believe me. United States military planners in the immediate aftermath of the Second World War, they described the Middle East, as they put it, as a stupendous source of strategic power. Those were their words. And the greatest material prize in human history. That's what they called it. So at a time when Western elites see their power slipping away, they have decided that the only hope they have, in my view, for maintaining a position of global dominance is to crush all resistance in West Asia, to seize complete, unchallenged control of this area of the world. And for that purpose, they are willing to commit any crime, well, including genocide.
Well, that brought me to something. We see the mass slaughter of Palestinians, but we know that the Jordanians have a huge population of Palestinians. First of all, the ineptitude and the arrogance of the so-called Arab governments. If this keeps going on, wouldn't that lead to their overthrow? Because they have shown little to no action against Israel, but all of them showed action to overthrow the legitimate president of Syria for the sake of Israel. How long can this play out where they can pretend, because they'll say Allahu Akbar and they'll say all of this stuff like this, and then they'll go right along with the genocide of Christians, Palestinians, Muslims of all ills, and then they'll work with Israel, and they'll work with the United States, one being Erdogan of Turkey.
Yeah, that's a really important question. And I'm personally, even though I think I have a sense of how brutally oppressive these autocracies in the Middle East are, these Western-backed tyrants, I'm surprised we haven't seen one of these regimes overthrown by now. I was in Jordan last year. When I went to Palestine, I also spent some time in Amman, and I actually entered Palestine by traveling overland from Amman through the Allenby Bridge into the occupied West Bank. And I attended some protests in Amman. And there was a lot of anger in those protests, but they are also very heavily policed. And, human rights experts have opined that thousands of people have been arrested by the Jordanian monarchy. And so there's quite a bit of repression there. But I think that the Jordanian autocrat is in a very fragile position politically. And I wouldn't be surprised, if this continues, and especially if it expands to the West Bank. If they begin expelling the Israelis, I'm sure they would love to do this. And if we let them get away with it, they'll probably try. If they begin expelling, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of Palestinians from the occupied West Bank into Jordan, I think you can kiss goodbye to that monarchy. It'll be overthrown. It'll be complete chaos. And the Israelis, I say, I think that's on the path. I think that's the path they're on. The one that surprised me most, however, is Egypt, because Egypt actually shares a border with Gaza, and Egypt could just force the issue. They just could do it. There's just no question. If they said, they have a large army, they have a much bigger army than I think Israel does, and they receive, $billions of military aid from the United States, not as much as Israel, but they're well armed. And if they brought tanks to the border, and I'm sure the Egyptian people are well aware of this fact, if they brought tanks and masses of troops up to the border and said, we are opening up distribution points for the influx of humanitarian aid, what are the Israelis going to do? Are they going to go to war with Egypt? Maybe they would. But I think at the end of the day, if the Egyptians really wanted to force the issue and not go to war with the Israeli army, but say, we're going to bring the aid in, and we're going to protect the aid with our military forces. And if you try to stop us, we will be in a full-blown war. They could do that. I think they could easily solve the problem of, well, easily is maybe too strong a word, but they are eminently capable of solving the problem of the starvation of the Palestinian people. And so the Egyptians know this. There's a tremendous amount of anger in the country. And they have a history of overthrowing, tyrants, the Egyptian people who are pro-Israel. They've done it twice. Anwar Sadat, after he made a peace deal with the apartheid regime in Israel, he was assassinated. And then they overthrew his successor. The name is yes, correct, right. He was overthrown, and they actually put in place, and I think the one and only real election in my lifetime in Egypt, they put in place somebody who was much more sympathetic to the Palestinian people, and I think that's a big part of the reason why he was overthrown by Sisi in the military within a matter of, I think it was less than a year, because it was obvious he wasn't a pro-Palestinian radical, Mohammed Morsi, the man who won this election that was held years ago in Egypt. But he certainly was much more compassionate towards the Palestinian people than his predecessor. And so I think that's part of the reason why they overthrew him. So they have a history of doing this, the Egyptian people. The problem they confront, Rashid, is that this is a particularly sadistic dictator. Al-Sisi, there was a report put out in 2019 by Human Rights Watch, which said that the Sisi regime had established, I'd never seen this language before, a torture assembly line. And they were just basically, it was like they made it into this efficient method of torture. One person after another was being brought in, political dissident, opponent of the government was being brought into a torture chamber. And there was just kind of a standard procedure for inflicting excruciating pain on the person. And then they bring in the next person, and it was literally an assembly line. That's what they got going on in Egypt. This is a government, a regime that we are supporting in the West. So I think the Egyptian people are living under a reign of terror, basically, and so I think that's basically what's caused them to hold back up until now. But man, I don't know how much longer they're going to be able to oppress dissidents in Egypt. I wouldn't be surprised if there's an uprising there, spontaneously at any time.
Yes, someone told me that Sisi right now is dealing with a whole host of problems because he owes his coming to power to the United States and Israel, and people, the lower to mid-rank officials in the army, they're fed up with him, and he's doing his best to try to hold on to power. But I don't see how he can continue to hold on to power. With the lip service, it's almost the same as with Erdogan, the lip service against the Israelis, and then supplies the Israelis with oil from the pipelines and stuff. I think people are starting to catch on to this, and I think these leaders are on their way out, because the world is watching in real time on the internet the mass slaughter of people, and the United States is quiet about it and yet screaming about what is it, Iran's supposedly violation of the nuclear charter or whatever. I mean, Dimitri, how long do you think, just an estimate, that this can go on? Because things like this cannot go on infinitum.
Yeah, that's so hard to answer. I mean, I would be really surprised if Israel, I'm already beyond surprised by how long this has happened. I have to just qualify my answer by saying I'm shocked. I never would have thought, when I woke up on October 7th and learned what had happened in Israel, the attacks by the Palestinian militants, the first thing that went through my head, Rashid, is that we are about to see the worst violence inflicted upon Palestinians in our lifetimes. And the gauge that I kind of used, because in my mind I was thinking, how bad could this be? And so I went back to 2014, which up until that point in time had been the deadliest war on Gaza in our lifetimes. In that particular conflict, the Israelis massacred over 500 children. Okay, and in the summer of 2014, And I remember that I remember distinctly the global outcry that caused, right? So when I woke up on October 7th, I was thinking to myself, it's going to be a lot more than 500 children. I can say that with knowing as I do the Israeli genocidal regime or the apartheid system in there and how they've treated the Palestinian people. I'm sure they're going to inflict far worse casualties than that. And this is going to go on far more than a few weeks as the war in 2014 went on. But I, in my own mind, was ballparking a couple of months. I thought we were going to watch 2 or 3 months of horror. I never imagined it was going to get to this. I'm speechless. We are almost 2 years into this genocide, and they've killed, over 20,000 Palestinian children. 500, little more than 500 in 2014, which caused global outrage. They've killed over 20,000 Palestinian children, and we're still allowing them to slaughter them every day and to starve them every day. So I nonetheless believe that they are hanging by a thread, the Israelis, because of the polling that we're seeing in the West. We are seeing unprecedented levels of hostility towards Israel in Western countries. And they just did a poll in Canada which showed that 52% of Canadians believe Israel is committing genocide. I think the last number I saw for the United States was somewhere north of 40% believe Israel is committing genocide. The percentage of Democrats who support Israel is mind-blowing how low it is. I think it's somewhere in the range of 15%. I can't remember the exact number, but the vast majority of Democrats now have more sympathy for Palestinians than Israelis. And then you have people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, one of the leading figures in the MAGA movement, and Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens, very influential voices in the MAGA movement, just tearing strips off of Israel. I watched this episode of Candace Owens 10 days ago, and she said, these were her exact words, "Anybody who supports Israel is human filth." She called them human filth. This is somebody who has very significant influence in Donald Trump's base. So I just can't imagine, with public opinion swinging so, strongly against Israel, that this could go on another few months. I think that we're basically coming to the end of it, but that doesn't mean that, the problem will be solved. When I say the end of it, I mean, I think the Israelis are almost at the point where they're going to be forced to allow humanitarian aid in much larger quantities, and they're going to have to stop the mass bombing of Gaza. But that doesn't mean that the genocide will be over, because these people are, the 2 million or so Palestinians who have survived this horror are in extraordinarily difficult circumstances. They have no housing, they have no water, they have no medical system. Many of them are just 1 day away or several days away from starving to death. They're suffering from preventable diseases. They have been, you want to talk about PTSD? Can you imagine the psychological condition of the children in the Gaza Strip after this? The conditions there are so horrific that it's going to take a lot more than 500 or 600 aid trucks going into Gaza every day, which is what was going in before the genocide began, to save the Palestinian people. So although I believe that they're nearing the limit of Western, patience for their crimes, that doesn't mean that they are going to do what is necessary to save the Palestinian people. So this pressure that we're bringing to bear is going to have to be maintained for years to come. We can't let up just because the Israelis started letting in a few hundred aid trucks a day and stop bombing Gaza. We can't let up.
Some people say that maybe Trump is allowing this to take place because of the Epstein files and they have something on him. And there may be something legitimate to that, but we have to understand that this was a plan put in motion prior to Trump also. I believe they want to create order out of chaos because the empire is facing sudden collapse. And if you look at all of the wars from Libya to Somalia to Yemen, and all of this is to balkanize and break up these states so that they can be weaker vassal states to Israel So maybe there's something to Epstein files having something on Trump, but this is a multi-party, multi-administration plan to do what they're doing in Palestine, in Lebanon. Because think about what happened when they tried to decapitate the leadership of Hezbollah. This was months and months in planning, because the United States was delivering the very weapons that were needed to do what it did when they decapitated, and the United States was negotiating with them, the same as when they were negotiating with Soleimani and called him for a meeting in Iraq. I think all of this is interconnected to balkanize and weaken the entire West Asian region, to keep it weakened so that the United States can buy a little more time for empire. And I think that the Palestinians, in the eyes of America, is just a sacrificial lamb, and they're throwing them to the slaughter and to let Israel do whatever they want, because any administration would have spoken out about the mass genocide of what's going on over there.
Yeah, look, they're definitely trying to make an example out of the Palestinian people. They're trying to terrify everybody in not just the region, not just the region of West Asia. I think that the empire is telling the world, look what we're doing to the Palestinians. This is what we will do to anybody who resists our hegemony. We're coming for you next if you resist the dominance of the Western elites. And I agree completely with what you said, Rashid. You know, sure, they may have compromised on Donald Trump, but this is a long and sordid tradition. Genocide, atrocities, apartheid. This has been perpetrated by Western governments for centuries. The United States and Canada and other states in the Western Hemisphere are founded on a genocide that were perpetrated by Europeans. You know, of course, there was the institution of slavery. They've perpetrated other genocides in the world. You know, there were genocides. There was something like 500,000 people in Indonesia were massacred, people who were leftists, by a Western-backed dictator, you know, a few decades ago. I could go on in Guatemala and so forth. There have been, you know, heinous acts of genocide and apartheid being committed by these regimes, these Western regimes, for centuries. So it's not ultimately about, you know, compromise that they have on Donald Trump or anybody else. This is part of the DNA of the Western elites. And when it comes to West Asia, you know, as I think many people in your audience will know, I'm sure you're aware of this, you know, General Wesley Clark revealed to the world back in, I think, 2002, 2003, that the neocons had a plan. And they've been carrying out that plan ever since. You know, their plan was to take out Libya, Sudan, Syria, Iraq, and the last, I think there were 7 countries in the region, and the last one was Iran. And Dick Cheney, that psychopath who never paid a dime of accountability for his heinous crimes, you know, he had this phrase. He said, you know, real men go to Tehran. He said something like, you know, weaklings go to Baghdad and real men go to Tehran. So they've had this project was put in place long before Donald Trump became the president, long before Joe Biden became the president. And one administration after another has been implementing this plan. And if we let them finish it, it will result in the extermination of the Palestinian people.
So does that mean that all of this big talk about, and I won't hold you long, all of this big talk about Donald Trump cleaning the swamp out, does that mean that that was rhetoric and he's a gator in the swamp?
Is that a rhetorical question, my friend? I think yes, he's definitely a swamp creature. He's unquestionably a swamp creature, one of the most ugly and slimy creatures in the swamp, as a matter of fact. You know, he's been running around flapping off his mouth telling us about how he wants to make peace. Okay, what has he done? What the hell has he done in, you know, it's been 7 months. It's only been 7 months. Look at what the man has actually done. He said he was going to bring the Ukraine war to an end in 24 hours. He even said he was going to bring it to an end before he returned to the White House. Okay, that he'd get it done before January 20th. So here we are now. Not only is it going on, it's arguably even more intense now than it was when Donald Trump returned to the White House. And the U.S. government is providing battlefield intelligence to the Ukrainians. They're providing weapons. They have not lifted any sanctions on Russia. They are threatening new sanctions, including on countries that buy Russian oil. Okay, so that turned out to be a complete lie. The genocide in Gaza is every bit as bad and arguably even worse. We weren't seeing the number of people being starved that are being starved now when Joe Biden was in office. Maybe it probably would have happened if he'd stayed in office, but it's certainly no better in Gaza and probably worse. It certainly is worse in the West Bank. He attacked Yemen, Trump did, right, for 2 months. And why? Simply because Ansar Allah was trying to stop a genocide. And he brutally attacked Yemen. He attacked Iran, the Islamic Republic, directly, something that Biden did not do, although it was supporting Israel's aggression against Iran. So this man is the exact antithesis of a peacemaker. Okay, if they have a Nobel Prize for warmongering psychopathic depravity, I would nominate Donald Trump for that award. I think he'd be a shoo-in, a shoo-in. So this man has all the characteristics of a Washington, swamp creature. He's a neocon, a bloodthirsty. He's a racist. He's and I don't want to be unfair to him. His predecessors are pretty much as bad as he is, and I'm talking in particular about Joe Biden. But this man ain't going to clean up Washington. I think anybody who's drinking that Kool-Aid needs to start sipping on a different beverage.
Dimitri, I know you have a lot to do, man, and you took time out of your busy schedule to do this for me, man. I really appreciate it, my friend. And I just got to say it again, man. You do excellent work covering these stories in Palestine and the stories that even alternative media overlooks a lot of the time. And I want to take the time out to give you your flowers right now while we're on the air. Thank you so much, my friend.
Hey, listen, you do fantastic work too, and it's always a great pleasure to talk to you, my friend. It really is. Thank you for having me on.
All right, my man. Be blessed and be safe.
Take care. Peace out.
All right. Everybody, see, we bring you the best guests and everything. And I wanted to talk to you guys a second about what's going on. So someone put something in the comment section. So I took a picture of the monitor here, okay? And I don't know if it would allow me to show you. Let me see if I can pull it up for you, because I have a background going on and I don't know if it'll allow me, but I'm going to try, because I like to prove what I'm saying and shut people up, okay? Let's see. I don't know if this will allow me, maybe from one angle. Let me see. Give me a second, everybody. I got to find an angle to put it up there for you. Let's see what angle. Maybe I'll do it on another show because it's not allowing me to do it. But anyway, it says on here, excellent connection. I'm monitoring the connection to my show from my internet provider, and I'm monitoring it from YouTube, and it's saying excellent connection. So I told you they've been here to my house. They've changed out routers and modem twice this week. Okay. These are brand new computers. So it's not me doing this. This is what I continue to tell you guys. It is not me doing it, and I have proof. I'm taking pictures of the flipping YouTube and the Cox cable showing you that this is excellent connection with new computers. So this is a concerted effort to frustrate the people who come to this channel, because they understand that we're going to give you the raw truth regardless of whatever anyone else saying to keep their subscriber content or whatever. I don't care about that. My thing is to tell you the truth, whether you like it or not, because truth ultimately is the only thing that could save you. Truth is the only thing that will prevail. Falsehood advances for a while. But when it goes head to head with truth, eventually truth knocks the brains out of falsehood. So we're going to continue to march regardless of what they do, try to slow down the show, frustrate the host and my audience. We're going to try to continue to go down this line and tell you the truth, because ultimately God is our judge, not YouTube, not StreamYard, and not any of these social media platforms. And on that note, I want to say to you all, do right by others, not because there's some material gain to have from it or some accolades to get behind you. Do right by others because it's the right, the godly, and main thing to do. Because even when no one else is watching you, remember that God Almighty is watching you. He sits high, as my mom always says, but he looks low. All right. Know that I love each and every one of you who loves truth, but know that the love that I have for you will always pale in comparison to the love that God has for you. Until we next speak again, stay strong, stay true, but above all things, remember to stay righteous, because that's the only thing that's going to get you out of here. Hey, mama, your baby boy loves you more than life. Deuces, everybody. Thank you so much.
Told you to walk away. That was my first and last mistake. I'm blue without your face. But what can I do? 'Cause I'm just a sinking ship, and you're just a